KV. And greetings, everybody, wherever you are, whether you're in Sohar or Chennai or Paradeep. I want to communicate to you my best wishes for a wonderful 2011. And more than anything else, wish you all a very safe and incident-free year ahead. As KV pointed out, I have a little bit of a cold and sore throat, which I caught in New Delhi around New Year's Eve. I'm still trying to shake it, so if I stop for a moment to get a sip of water, I would hope that you will understand why I'm doing that. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts. Safety is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I must admit that it is something that changed my life some years ago. I worked for Chevron for almost 33 years. I used to get up at about 4:15 in the morning, exercise, get ready, and I will be in the office at about 6:45 every morning. Let me take you back to March 19th. 1997. I'm in Houston, Texas. Got up in the morning, did my exercise. I was getting ready when about 6:15, my phone rings. I pick up the phone. On the other end was my division manager, who had the responsibility for part of our operations in Chevron Pipeline Company. And I knew that I usually don't get calls that time of the day, so anticipation was that it probably wasn't a great news, and indeed it wasn't. He told me that we had a major incident at one of our pumping stations located in Wortham, Texas. A drive of about 4 hours from Houston. My first question was, were there any major injuries? Do we have any human beings who have been impacted by this incident? And the answer was yes. One of our contract welders was severely injured. At that point, my response was that I will be leaving my home in less than 10 minutes, and I will drive straight to Wortham, and I would like him to meet me there. He communicated to me that the person who was injured had already been moved to a hospital, and I asked him to give me the address of the hospital. And I said I would actually like to drive straight to the hospital instead of going to the incident site. When I arrived at the hospital, I was walking through the hallway, and I saw an individual on a stretcher who was being transported from one of the rooms to an operating theater. I looked at that individual, and I could barely recognize a human being underneath there. That person had third-degree burns over 75% of his body. His face was beyond recognition. His skin was peeling off and red as tomato in color. I inquired as to what happened to this individual. And I was told, this is the welder who was working for Chevron at Wortham, who was injured and burned. I walked from there and went into the waiting room where his wife and his young daughter were waiting. And I can tell you one thing. Facing those two people, I really did not have words for several seconds. I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know how to console them. I had no answers. I only had questions. And questions in my mind were, why did it happen? Who am I, as the president of the company, to expose a human being to those circumstances? Who am I to change the life of not just the individual, but the entire family? Who am I to take away the rights of that human being to be able to go home and pick up his 3-year-old daughter and be able to play? That day changed me forever. Still to this day, I can assure you that I, from time to time, have that picture in front of me. And every time I talk about safety, that picture is vivid in my mind. And I vowed that day that as a human being, I will do everything possible for the rest of my life to make sure that every human being that comes to work for Chevron, whether it be an employee, a manager, a contractor, a mechanic, or a casual visitor, I will do everything possible to give them the right to go home to their families injury-free at the end of each shift every day. It doesn't matter what title we have, the chairman of the company, or a welder, or a chaprasi. At the end of the day, we are all employees of the company. We are all human beings. We have exactly the same rights, God-given right, to earn a decent living without exposing ourselves to hazardous conditions. So to me, if the chairman came to my facility, he received exactly the same treatment that a welder, a mechanic, or a peon received. Because there is no difference in human life. And we need to do everything possible to make sure that every single person who comes to an L&T office, to an L&T site, to an L&T workshop, goes home without a Band-Aid if they came to work without a Band-Aid. We are blessed with 10 fingers and 10 toes. We need to make sure that we give every one of our colleagues the right to go home with 10 fingers and 10 toes. I have 3 granddaughters, and I love to play with them. They're young, 6.5, 5, and 3.5. I love to pick them up. I love to give them a ride on my back. Do I want to get injured while working? Do I want to lose my arm and lose my right to pick them up and give them a hug? I don't. And if I don't, what right do I have to take that away from anybody else? Doesn't matter who it is. Human beings are human beings. Titles are only an indication of what we do for the company. We are all equal as human beings, and we all have fundamental right to go home safely every single day. I wanted to share with you that aspect of it before I go into a lot of detail. From that day onwards, I dedicated myself to a journey of learning what does it take to establish a workplace that is completely free of incidents and injuries. In my 33 years, when I started with Chevron, I always thought I was doing very well in focusing on safety. I focused on making sure that people have personal protective equipment. I made sure that there were safe work practices. I made sure that there were slogans all over the workplace. I made sure that there were policies that were well defined, that people were told of the policies. But after this incident, when I started really becoming a student of safety, I learned that those things only address part of the equation. If you really want to create a workplace that is absolutely free of injuries and incidents, you need to not only engage the minds of the people, you need to engage their hearts. And that is what this first slide is all about. Most of the safety practices that you find anywhere are focused on the objective side. As a matter of fact, not even full objective side. Most practices focus on the bottom half of the objective side. That is the systems. There is an organizational structure. We always have a health, environment, and safety expert, and we think, oh, I've done my job. I've appointed somebody to be head of HES. We have policies, we have procedures, we have work processes, safe work practice, management of change, process hazard analysis. We do all those things and we think, oh, as a leader, I have done my job. And I am really for safety. That is addressing only a small fraction of what it takes to create an injury-free workplace. If you really want to become a student of that, you need to start marching up on the objective side. The first thing you need to do is to start addressing the behaviors of the people. Why do people behave the way they behave? Because behaviors lead to incidents. Most of the time, a welder has been doing a job for a long time. You may have a defined welding procedure with defined protective equipment that he needs to wear. But for the last 10 years, he's been taking shortcut on one step and nothing has happened. Well, that person assumes that it's not going to happen to me and he will continue to do that and exhibit that behavior. Because that behavior has not resulted in a negative consequence for that individual. But if we don't address that behavior, statistically, someday it will catch up. And that person could be injured severely. And I will talk about how to impact the behaviors. And I just want to plant the seed here. I'm a strong believer in behavior science. And I have a very simple theory. It's called ABC theory. A is antecedents. Antecedents are things that we have defined under the systems. The policies, procedures, management requirements, all those things are antecedents. B is behavior, and C is consequences. Tremendous amount of scientific research has been done, and it has been demonstrated that the behaviors are impacted by antecedents only up to 20% of the time. Antecedent will get a behavior started, but the behavior will not be sustained unless there are consequences in place. So policies and procedures will get the behavior started, but sooner or later, if that behavior is not reinforced, it's going to decay and people will start taking shortcuts. So in order to really make sure that you affect the behaviors, you must have consequences in place. And consequences here, I do not mean disciplinary action or, firing, dismissing somebody. Consequences are personal. Injury is a consequence. Reinforcing somebody for having done the job according to procedure is a consequence, positive consequence. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. What I understand that ECC is trying to do by engaging DuPont is DuPont will address the behavior part of the system. They will talk about how to impact the behaviors of the people and create a culture where behaviors are consistent with a safe workplace. My personal philosophy is that will get you a long way towards improving safety, but it will not get you to the point of creating a workplace that focuses on zero injuries and zero incidents. And nobody should ever don't let anybody convince you that zero is not attainable. It is attainable. And I'll give you some examples of how we have been able to attain that. Those things, let me see if I can make these things are objective. And they engage the minds of the people. Most people will understand that if I behave in a manner that is not consistent with the procedure, I could get injured. Mentally, they can relate to that. But if they have taken shortcut 5 times, 6 times, it becomes a habit because they get the attitude, it is not going to happen to me. I can continue to do that. It hasn't happened. So in order to truly attain what I would call an incident-free workplace, you need to address the subjective side. And the subjective side, on the corporate level, is where the leadership of the company says that safety is a core value. Safety is not a priority. A lot of people say, I have seen slogans, safety is priority 1. I'm sorry. Safety is non-negotiable. You cannot prioritize safety. Safety is a core value. I do not believe in saying safety is priority 1. To me, safety is above priorities. It is a core value. I believe that I must do everything possible to make you go home without injury. And that's a core value and belief. And that belief has to emanate from the highest level of the company. And if it doesn't, I don't care what you do, it's not going to happen in the corporation. You will not change the culture. The culture has to start from the senior most level saying, safety is a value, and I share that value with the rest of my corporation. That organization has a commitment to make sure that you go home safely. I will sacrifice production, but I want to make sure that you go safely. If I find a condition that can lead to injury, and I will have in a refinery a startup delayed by 2 days, I will do that. I have given President's Award up to $5,000 to a person who exercised what we call a stop work authority doing a refinery startup and said, time out, this facility is not ready to be commissioned. And he was right. And I personally went all the way to UK to present him the award for having the courage to stand up and say, we're not ready to start up the facility because it can lead to injuries. That's the culture, that's the ethics that you need to create. But that has to translate to individuals. If it starts from the leadership, if the leadership starts exhibiting the behaviors that are consistent with safety as a core value, the people in the company will start believing that safety is truly a core value. I need to make sure that it is my value, so it's reflected in my attitude. Every time I visited a refinery, and I had 21 refineries reporting to me, I would make sure that at least 35 to 40% of my time was dedicated to walking through the refinery. And before any meeting will start, my first standard agenda item was spend at least half an hour talking to me about safety. When I would walk through the facility, I made sure that I complied with all rules. Even though I was president, I could walk across certain lines, but I would not. And before walking, I would ask them, what are the things that are going on in the refinery? What can go wrong? So that I am well prepared. So you have to create that kind of commitment. And this comes really from the top, then everybody else embracing that culture to say, yes, safety is a core value. So I urge you to think about safety not only in terms of systems, because that's what most companies do. And if you stop here, you're scratching the surface. But if you combine with that behavior-based safety, you have significant advantage over those who don't. But in order to truly accomplish incident-free workplace, you need to address the subjective side, which is engaging the heart of the individual. And I will share with you how we engage the heart of the people. So let me move forward. I'm sorry I'm talking a little too much, and I'll try to make sure that I shrink this a little bit. So in order to create a really incident-free workplace, you need to have an integrated approach. An approach that starts with leadership, that creates a culture where safety is a core value, that addresses any potential unsafe behaviors. And that doesn't mean that I had the commitment. I had, even as a president, I think those who have visited my office know there was, outside my door was a signed letter, my commitment to the employees in the company, which indicated what I will do. One of them was that I will never walk past an unsafe condition. I think Mr. Kotwal will remember some years ago I came here and walking through the shop, I pointed out some unsafe practice and I was told, don't worry, it will be taken care of. And I told Mr. Kotwal, sorry, I'm not going to take the next step unless this thing is taken care of now, because I have a commitment. I will not walk past it. Please address that now so that we can continue the journey. I had commitment that I will not only make sure that I am safe, but I'll make sure that people who work with me are safe. As a welder, as a helper, you have to be your brother's keeper. Those are the kinds of commitments that are required in the behavior. And commitment and intention must be loudly communicated, addressed, not only by bulletins and memos and all of that, but by the actions. When the leadership of L&T visits facilities, the questions that you asked, the first thing that you asked is not, when are you going to get this project completed? But the question ought to be, what is your safety record? When was the last incident? Who was injured? What have we learned? Not for the purpose of pointing fingers or punishing somebody, but what have we learned? What have you done to communicate those learnings from your side to the rest of L&T? Those are the questions you should be asking. And that's what this commitment and intention is all about. So I think I've already covered this. Addressing both the objective side and the subjective side is absolutely essential to create an incident and injury-free workplace. Behavior-based safety, there are lots of systems. There's one approach called BST. There is LPS. LPS is loss prevention system. DuPont has its own system. I have spent extensive amount of time implementing LPS throughout Chevron, including Australia. And I will share with you some of the elements of LPS that I find are superior to many other behavior-based systems, because LPS builds a great deal of accountability, which I like. But I'm not advocating LPS. I want to be very, very clear here. I have no personal benefit, gains or losses. I'm simply sharing with you my experience. I don't consider myself an expert. I'm still a student of safety. but LPS has helped me tremendously. And then subjective side, I will talk about a process called IIF. How do you create an incident injury-free culture in the company? So I want to share both of those things with you. So let's look at the journey. LPS. LPS, as it clearly indicates, is a loss prevention system. It's broader than safety. To me, a loss, how do we define loss? Any unplanned event that has an impact on business or people must be prevented. Any unplanned event that impacts people or the business must be prevented. And that is what this process is. How do you prevent the losses? I consider that as a loss. What is a loss? It could be business inefficiency. A billing error in the finance organization is a loss. The process of LPS will apply to that, as well as it will apply to safety and health. It applies to reliability of refinery, to product quality. Any kind of loss that has an impact on business, this process is applicable. And the objective is that all employees have safe, healthy, and loss-free workplace. That's the objective. Again, behavior-based system has to move from the traditional approach of we have a safety program in place. Program has a connotation of an endpoint. There is a starting point, there is an endpoint. Safety is a never-ending journey. In spite of practicing a lot of these things, I learn more about safety every single day. It's not a priority. It has to be a core value for you. Instead of focusing on the accident, you need to focus on the loss. It is not a top-down. It's a bottoms-up as well. It's not reactive. It is proactive. It is definitely not fault-finding, which we do very often. Do an investigation and say, who do we find who made a mistake? It is more focused on fact-finding. What have we learned? What are the facts of the situation? How can we communicate that? It looks for the causes in this traditional one. Here you look for root causes. You need to ask the question why at least 6 times. Most of the time we stop and say, the machinery failed. This stopped and the person got injured. Well, why did it fail? Maybe somebody didn't lubricate it. Didn't put the lube oil. Well, why didn't the person put the lube oil? Because he has not been doing it routinely and nobody cared. It became a norm for him or for her. Why didn't people care? Because the supervisor was not paying attention. Why was supervisor not paying attention? Because he or she was not positively reinforced for keeping the equipment running. You got to keep going asking. And you will find many times it will end up with the supervisors and management and the leadership. Because we create that culture. We condone things. And when we condone things, they become norm. So most of the time we stop very early. We need to step up and be leaders. And leaders are, when we are wrong, we need to stand up and say, sorry, I didn't do my job properly. And that resulted in somebody getting injured. And to me, when this person got injured, I was responsible as the president of the company. Because that person did not follow proper lockout, tagout procedure. But he did not follow that because we had created a culture where lockout, tagout was not considered that important. We ignored it. I was responsible, not that welder. I should have taken that responsibility. So that's, instead of negatively reinforcing people, focus ought to be, how do I find people doing their job right so I can go and give them a pat on the back? Instead of finding somebody doing something wrong. I had the habit, when I got to the office at 6:45, at least a couple of times a week, first thing I would do is to write a small note on the yellow sticky paper and go and put it on the chair of the person who may have done something right. So when they come to work, the first thing they see is a yellow sticky. What is this? Oh, there's a note from Jagjeet thanking them for having done something right. Identifying what they're doing well and just recognizing that. A yellow sticky. A small thing like that goes a long way in communicating your commitment. What are the fundamentals of loss prevention system? You are all probably familiar with the pyramid, safety pyramid. It all starts with things that are very minor and eventually leads to a major loss. These are the typical ratios. The ratios can be different for different companies, but in general, for almost 600 near losses in a company, there's usually one very major incident, and there are at least 10 losses and about 30 equipment damage. These ratios can be different for L&T, can be different for any other company, but fundamental is that most of us focus on what happened here, learning from here, while we should be focusing on what can we do at the bottom of the pyramid to minimize these things rising up. The first thing, a tool that is extremely important is called SPSA. SPSA is Safe Performance Self-Assessment. And I'll show you what it means. It's a very simple thing. Some people call it take 5. Some people call it stop. But the objective is to really think about what you're going to do. It's very easy to use, Safe Performance Self-Assessment. It really empowers the employee to think about loss prevention before they start their job. And it really works very well with the whole operating procedure. When should you do your SPSA? It should be done at the start of any job, at the start of the day. When I got into the car to drive to work, I used to do SPSA. If it was raining in California, the first rain, my SPSA would be that today the road is going to be very slick. I need to make sure that I drive 10 miles an hour slower than I normally drive because there is a chance for me skidding on the road and getting into an accident. That is an SPSA. When I put a Christmas tree in the house, I ask the question, what am I going to do that could cause the problem? And very often people will put a string of lights, a string of lights, a string of lights and combine them all into series, overload the circuit. Next thing happens in one spark, and trust me, those pine needles burn like crazy and you can put your entire house in jeopardy. Asking that question, am I doing it right? Will it cause a problem? That's the kind of thing. You should do it anytime you're doing an unusual activity. When the circumstances of your work change, or when any kind of incident has taken place. And you should do it not only at work, but also do it at home. And it is to be done by everybody, and the supervisors have a responsibility to steward it. So what is it? It basically has 3 components. Number 1 is to assess the risk. Number 2 is analyze how you can reduce the risk. And number 3 is to make sure that you can do the job safely. But the key here is the 2 questions. Before you start the job, you ask the question, what could go wrong while I'm doing this job? Okay? Many times you are hanging a picture on the wall and you don't have a step ladder. You pick up a chair like this and you say to your wife, give me the hammer and nail, I'll hang it. How many times people have done that? I have done it. I can admit to you. But what happens? A chair like this, what can go wrong? You step on it and it moves. And you fall down. So what can go wrong? I could fall off the chair. What is the worst thing that can happen if something does go wrong? This is the most important thing to engage the hearts of the people. Most people think, oh, so what? Yeah, this is only 2 feet off the ground, 3 feet off the ground, what will happen? Trust me, people have had major fractures falling 2 feet off the ground. As I talked about Christmas tree, trust me, there are several examples where houses have been burned. What is the worst thing that can happen? You are mowing the lawn. In the US, we very often have a mower or we have a weed cutter. You've seen the weed cutter that rotates and cuts the weeds? Hey, I'm just going to cut this small portion, doesn't matter, I don't need the goggles. And you start cutting, what's the worst thing that can happen? A piece of the rock can hit that weed cutter, get into your eye, and trust me, there are cases where people lose eyesight. You go blind. Think of the consequences. A person who is a wage earner in the family, for one action of not thinking, could become blind for the rest of his or her life. And the impact is not only on the individual, but think about the family. A person might have a wife, may have 3 children, and you have not only changed your life, you have changed the life of those people. It will never be the same. That is where you need to personalize it. Keep asking, what is the worst thing that can happen? How will it impact me? How would it impact my family? How would it impact my colleague? And keep asking that again. What is the worst thing that can happen? As I said, simple weed cutting can lead to blindness. Most people don't think about it, think, oh yeah, nothing is going to happen to me. मैं तो हमेशा ही करता हूँ, every time, ऐसे ही चलता है, क्या है? Nothing chalta hai. It can happen, and it does happen. Statistically, it can happen. Once you know, you will never do weed cutting without glasses, because you will say, how do I reduce the risk of that happening? I'll put the glasses on. To hang the picture, I will go and get a step ladder. I'll ask my brother, my son, to come and hold the ladder while I'm climbing up and hammering it, instead of climbing a chair or a stool. I would never do that. How do you ensure that there is a safe operation? That's what you do. Take the necessary steps. Very simple process. You don't need anybody else. It is you stopping and asking the question every morning, every time you do a job, every time you change a job. What can go wrong? What is the worst thing that can happen if something does go wrong? And what do I do to minimize that risk? If I don't have the skills, I need to go and get somebody who has the skills to help me do that job safely. Job safety analysis. I'm sure in L&T, this is the common practice. Before starting any job, you need to define what are the critical steps, but not only define in terms of the workman steps, but also ask the question, in this step, what are the hazards? And how do you mitigate those hazards? So job safety analysis has to move from simply saying, do A, B, C, and D, but there should be a column. Next column should say potential hazards, and third column should say mitigating measures. Job safety analysis is never complete without the second and third column. Most people do the first column. So please use that as another tool in the LPS system that I have used. Benefits of job safety analysis, I think they are very well understood by most people. It standardizes the job task. It also helps in training people if you have really well-defined job safety analysis. But most of all, it also gives you an opportunity to observe a worker, and I'll talk about observation. If you don't have a job safety analysis and you are observing somebody doing a task, you don't know what to observe, if the person is doing it right or wrong. To do a proper observation, you should have a JSA with you, and you should go through that checklist as the person is performing their task to provide them feedback. So let me lead you to that next level. The process is very simple. It's basically you select a process, what task is to be done. We have put together always a team of people, which may include the lowest level operator and mechanic, all the way to the supervisor, sitting together and outlining what are the JSA steps, what are the potential hazards, and how do we mitigate those. LPO. This I think you'll find in DuPont system also, and I think it's extremely important. Loss prevention observations. This is a part of the responsibility of the entire team to periodically take on the challenge of going and observing a person performing a task. You must have a JSA in your hand. It's a systematic way of observing what the person is doing. And observing is not only standing there and making note of what he's doing wrong, he or she. It is also actually spending more time in noting what the person is doing right. Absolutely. The person did this right, this right, this right, this right, this right, and then this item is questionable. I'm not sure he did it right, he or she. But everything that person has done right, you note down. It's a standard form that we used to use. The purpose is to identify undesirable behaviors, and that will help you prevent the losses. The LPO doesn't take very long. It's just a few minutes. The observer is there to compare the work activity with the company standard and the job safety analysis, note critically important and correct behaviors, and identify any deviations from the standard. You will see identifying correct behavior comes before identifying deviations, because this is human psychology. As a human being, I do things when I am given a pat on the back. Those things I will keep doing because I'm being positively reinforced. So reinforce the behaviors people are doing right. And this is a piece that sometimes in DuPont system may or may not exist today, is a feedback. In LPS system, we had a feedback system where the supervisor, the observer, and the observee will sit on the same shift in which the observation was done. Not even delayed to the next shift or next day. And the purpose there is for the supervisor it is led by the supervisor, and supervisor, first thing he or she does is positively reinforce all the behaviors that were correct. Make the person understand, you did this right, you did this right, you did this right, so you can continue to do that. And then discuss what are the questionable steps that were deviations. And it's a discussion. And that meeting is not meant to discuss anything else. You don't discuss performance that happened 3 months ago. It's only focused on that observation and provide the feedback to the employee so that they can correct their behaviors in the future. Loss investigation, another tool. Again, it is basically when an incident occurs, doing a thorough analysis and moving from cause to the root cause, asking the why at least 6 times to understand what actually caused it. Where is the human behavior that may have led to that step? Don't stop at the equipment failure only. That is only a symptom. You have to keep asking the question. So objective is to understand the contributing factor and then identify the solutions that must be implemented to prevent that happening in the future. Near loss. As I showed you in the pyramid, for every loss, there are a tremendous number of near losses. And the best way to prevent those is to learn from near losses. Most of the time, people say, nothing happened. Why do I need to spend the time to write down a near loss investigation? Well, because the learnings are there, the gems are there that you can learn and share with other people so that they will not have to go through the same thing. Because for all these near losses, one of the big incident is somewhere lurking in the bush, and it could happen. So this is, people think it's an administrative hassle. They question the value of reporting near loss, and they don't have a confidence that the organization will do anything about it. So the leadership has to create a culture where what learnings come out of near losses get addressed, solutions are implemented. This is, to me, the second most important tool in the toolbox. First was SPSA, Safe Performance Self-Assessment, and near loss investigation, because near losses have more lessons that can prevent major incidents in the future. When you learn something, you need to make sure that you're communicating. What we did was, immediately after the incident, we sent an alert. Alert was simply a statement of the facts. We had not yet done the investigation. We simply said this incident took place, so we are alerting the people. But then we have an LPS bulletin, which basically talked about what have we learned. And you do that. I know heavy engineering does that regularly, and I'm sure all the divisions do that. But this is a discipline that two levels. One is just the fact, what has happened, communicate. And then once the investigation is complete, what have we learned so that we don't do it in a different location. What we learned from here, this is the piece that I don't find in most behavior-based safety systems. There is no way to track if the solutions were implemented or not. In the LPS system, the supervisor has a responsibility. Every action item has what is the action item, who is going to do that, by what date. And supervisor has to personally go and do verification and validation. Let me give you some definition of that. Verification is that yes, the solution is implemented as was designed. Validation is that yes, the solution will actually solve the problem. And that has to be documented, has to be put in the computer system. It was my responsibility, even as a president of the company, that I had made a commitment in writing on my door that said, every month I will participate in so many near loss investigations and so many verification validations. So when I went to a refinery, I would randomly pick an incident that took place in that refinery in the last few months and ask the people who were involved to lead me to what has been done, what solutions have been implemented, have a discussion, reinforce them for what they have done, go back and enter in the computer. So a person sitting in Korea, an operator, was able to log into the computer and see Jagjeet Bindra had committed to do 3 verification validation this month. Has he done 3 or not? So there was an accountability even at my level. And this was a part of leadership. Every one of my managers signed a contract with me that they will do so many loss investigations, so many verification validation, and I reviewed that with them on a regular basis. We would have a meeting every month. My direct reports will sit down and we will project on the screen. Mr. Vandhava had committed to do 3 verification validation. He has done 4. Mr. Gupta had committed to do 3. He has done 1. Well, you don't have to say very much. When everything is on the screen, people have the peer pressure and everybody gets engaged. Every level of management. It went down from the president to the vice presidents to the GM to refining manager to the supervisor. Everybody had to sign a contract with their supervisor what they will do. And it was all done in a stewardship. I think I talked about, did it get done? Stewardship is what I talked about in just a moment ago. It is really looking at how the tools are being used and how are we as employees fulfilling our responsibility. It also helps you statistically to understand where the major incidents are taking place, so you can emphasize that part of the work to eliminate incidents in the future. So LPS really moves from really investigating what happened on the top to making sure that the quality of work is of top nature all the way across, from the bottom of the pyramid all the way to the top. And that is what helps you create 0 incidents in the organization. I think stewardship activities included quality reviews, verification, validation, monthly meetings, as I talked about, field verification, validation, all of these things. And each of us had to do those. And you will, even today, you can go in Sherman's system and log in and find out what I had done in the last 10, 12 years. It will tell you exactly what my contract was, what my commitment, and what I did. And I guarantee you that every single month, I would probably produce at least twice of what I had committed in writing. Because I wanted to be a role model for my direct reports that this is important. It matters to me. Because I had made a commitment that I want everybody to go home injury-free. and I needed to do my part. So that's the objective side. Now let me move on to the subjective side, which is the incident injury-free. And this is very touchy-feely. It is not something that is a lot of paperwork like observation and all of that, but this is really, as a leaders, making sure that we are leading the organization. And what we did, I invited all of my refinery leadership teams, close to about 75 people, for a 3-day workshop. And we did nothing except, with the facilitator, talk about where we are, what are the potential barriers to creating an incident-free workplace, and what are we going to do as leadership to change ourselves, not the rest of the organization. It's very easy to say, hey, you guys who work for me, go and do this. No, what are we going to do? Each other. Look in each other into eye and say, this is what we're going to do to create incident and injury-free workplace. And that's the leading part of it. Then making sure that that alignment cascades down the organization. And then making sure that that is actually happening in performance, and then finding a way to sustain it. So let me just quickly talk a little bit about that. We assigned a sponsor, an incident injury-free sponsor in each organization. And this is the practice that GS Engineering and Construction has totally embraced. And they would not let a single person get on a job site, whether it's contractor or subcontractor or employee, without having gone through a 2-day workshop on incident injury-free. But that means that every workshop was led by either me or one of my vice presidents. It was not delegated to HES supervisor. It was leadership, becoming the sponsor, getting executive coaching. And then we formed an incident injury-free leadership team that included people from different levels of the company. And they are the ones who did the survey of the employees to understand what is happening in the organization and how can we address that. And that leadership was fully empowered to make things happen, to make changes happen in the company. Then aligning. But once you have the leadership, you need to make sure that it's aligned across the organization. Then each of those leaders went back to their organization and conducted similar workshop where they took a stand. At the end of our workshop was, we literally raised our hands and said, I commit to doing everything possible to create an incident injury-free workplace. And we each signed those contracts that we're talking about. And that cascaded down the organization to make sure that there was complete alignment. After you get the alignment, then you need to make sure that things are actually happening. Not that the supervisor came to the meeting, raised a hand, went back and said, hey, Jagjeet, who cares? Jagjeet is here, 3 years later he's going to retire and chalta. No, you have to continue to monitor to make sure that the commitment made by people is being kept in the field. And that is not going and punishing somebody. That is asking inquisitive questions to make them reach the conclusion on their own. That, yeah, they are probably not doing their part. So translating that commitment into specific actions. That every supervisor's job was, when they came to the shift, that the first thing they did to talk with their employees was, what are we doing to do our job safely? What happened on the previous shift? What did we learn? What can go wrong? And how can we make sure that we all, 15 of us in one team, go home at the end of our shift to our family without injuries? That's the discussion that took place in every one of them. And then we had people who provided coaching, because not everybody is comfortable with this. So we had people who would go and coach supervisors as to how to start that conversation with the employees, because not everybody feels comfortable in having that kind of conversation. You may at this time feel, oh yeah, this is touchy-feely, but this is important. This is what touches the hearts of the people. And then sustaining it. Then making sure that it becomes a part of your system, part of your process, how you do this? How do you plan what your activities are going to be for the next day? Those are the kinds of things that happen. All of this has to be integrated. So this is the subjective side. How do you integrate that with what DuPont will bring to you? But this piece has to start with the leadership. This piece has to start by leaders absolutely making a stand that we want safety as a core value, not as a priority. What do you do beyond that? We integrated this into other things as well. One was tenets of operations. I retired from Chevron 18 months ago. Unfortunately, my habit hasn't changed. I still have the tenets of operation in my pocket. There are 10 principles that we had developed that were not to be compromised. They start, always operate within design or environmental limit. Always operate in a safe and controlled condition. They all start with always. Word is always. There are 10 of those. These were not to be compromised. And we found that any time the incident occurred, the severity of incident was directly proportional to how many of these tenets were violated. Fatality occurred when the tenets were violated, about 4 or 5 of them. Usually led to a fatality. These were the tenets. On the other side of this is very simple. Do it safely or not at all. There is always time to do it right. Number 3, when in doubt, find out. 3 very fundamental principles. Do it safely or not at all. Number 2, there is always time to do it right. Number 3, when in doubt, find out. Somebody who knows how to do their job. The stop work authority. I'll show you an example. These are tenets of operations. They are available on the slides. I'm not going through those because they may or may not be, some of these are not applicable to you because these are designed for operating a facility. But many of these are applicable, and you can design your own tenets that become the foundation of your culture. These are the tenet principles. Do it safely or not at all. There's always time to do it right. And when in doubt, find out. Don't take a risk if you're in doubt. Make sure you get somebody's help who knows the procedure. We also gave all of our employees a stop work authority. Would you believe that a refinery, if it shuts down, Pascagoula refinery, we had probably close to $3 to $5 million per day loss. But an operator at the lowest level had the right to shut it down if they felt that could lead to an incident. And that stop work authority was signed by the general manager of the refinery and given to every single employee. And they put it along with their badge. It was hanging on their chain. There's a constant reminder that you have the authority to stop this refinery if it can lead to unsafe practice, unsafe action. We always told people, can you see the hazard? If there is a hazard, are the right people involved? If it's a procedure that requires a specialized welder, do you have the right person available? Don't do it if you don't have the right people. Are you trained to do the job? Will you stop the unsafe work? And do you have a contingency plan if something does go wrong? Fundamental questions that are being asked for people. Integrating all of these into the holistic approach to safety is what is required. So incident injury free is addressing both the objective and the subjective side. Subjective side, to make it personal. This was my badge. This is my badge. And this badge is no longer a Chevron badge. This is my badge from a board I serve on in Australia to enter their premises. But I always had the badge that was clipped to my belt. Everybody thinks it's pretty simple, so what's the big deal? The other side of the badge, which I actually kept this way all the time, says my reason for being safe. And it has a picture of my 3 granddaughters. It is my reason for being safe. These are my 3 granddaughters. Which was a constant reminder to me that I want to go home safely so I can enjoy the time I have with my granddaughters. Every employee had a picture of their family. Those who didn't have kids, they were single, they may have a picture of their dog, their cat, whatever is near to them, their parents. But it's a constant reminder. And instead of having the posters that you see in many facilities, safe work practice poster, this poster, we had posters of families all over the workplace. And it basically said, my reason for staying safe. You walk into a Chevron refinery, you will find right from the gate, you will have a constant reminder that you have come to work to earn a living, but the basic purpose of earning a living is to go back to your family, to feed them, to enjoy them, to be with them. A constant reminder to touch the hearts of the people. And that was my batch, my 3 granddaughters. As a matter of fact, if you see pictures, when President Bush came to Pascagoula Refinery, that picture was published in the newspaper. If you blow it up, you'll see my granddaughters in there. Because I was wearing the badge, and President George Bush standing there, but my granddaughters are still in a blown-up picture. You'll see their faces. And it says, my reason for staying safe. So it's really engaging not just the minds, but the hearts of the people. It is making sure that leadership does its job in its stewarding. It's holding yourself and others accountable. As I said, ABC, there have to be consequences. Consequences, in my opinion, should mostly focus on positive consequences. I promoted those managers who showed tremendous leadership of safety. And those who didn't, they were demoted. They were actually, in some cases, were told that, you need to find another job. But that's very rare. But most of the time it was focused on rewarding people who really provide true leadership to safety. And that's really, really important. And making sure that the reward system is aligned with the leadership behaviors. The only other thing I can share with you is that safety is, in creating a safety culture, you need to celebrate successes. When an organization goes a certain period of time without an injury, we would say, okay, we have reached this milestone, 1 million man-hours, we're going to have an ice cream social. We'll get ice cream brought in, and every employee will get an ice cream sundae on a given day. Next time, it may be a lunch that is being given, or a coffee mug is given, or ball cap is given. You have to constantly reinforce those positive behaviors so people start looking forward to the next milestone. They continue to want to be safe. Last comment I want to make before I shut up. All of this seems like, Jagjeet is talking about just the people. Yes, I am talking about people because human life is invaluable. There's absolutely no value anybody can put on it. Doesn't matter who they are. But it is also good business. Trust me, a safe workplace has the highest productivity. The safe workplace has the highest customer satisfaction. Companies like Chevron and Shells and Totals of the world, or BP and ExxonMobil, when they think about L&T, first thing they ask is, what is your safety record? And if your safety record is not good, it can cost you hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contract. And I am serious. I have had contractors that we have refused to do business with because they didn't have good safety practices. They didn't even make our list. They were taken off in the pre-qualification. So it starts with caring about human beings, but at the end, it is a good business. It helps the business. It improves productivity. It has the lowest cost. It has the highest profitability. So at the end of the day, if we do all of these things combined, I think we can create an incident injury-free workplace so that we all can go home without a Band-Aid if we came to work without one. So thank you. I'll stop here. I'm sorry I've taken longer than you may have thought, but I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm open to questions or comments or disagreements or whatever you might have. Either it is too late or... Yes, sir.
You have propagated two theories, T and LPS. What is BST, sir?
BST is Behavior Safety Transformation or something. It's an acronym for a company that offers a behavior-based system. Yeah.
Maybe a very mundane question. Recently, when we were meeting up with, we had a debrief on one of the projects with ExxonMobil in Abu Dhabi. They looked at our submissions and they were giving us reasons why we were not on the short list. And of course, safety record figured in one of those, and they said our statistics is roughly double that of other comparable contractors. But then they made another statement which said that your statements with regard to what is the system you have in place, management system to ensure safety, doesn't come through loud and clear. Can you elaborate what could be missing there? What would you as a client look for in those areas?
I think what, and they are, to be frank, they are right, actually. I do not see L&T having a culture that truly is focused on safety today. I'm sorry to say this, and I'm being very blunt because I have tremendous passion for L&T. I mean, I love this company, and that's why I'm here. I think this company doesn't exude safety as a core value. This company uses safety as system procedures, and that's all it focuses on. It doesn't talk about human beings. It doesn't talk about the components of observation, feedback, reinforcement, all those things. That's what they're looking for. And that has to come out after you do the DuPont survey. I think you need to really realign your approach and create a system that not only talks about the objective side, but also starts addressing the subjective side. And then you will start communicating with ExxonMobils of the world. Let me tell you the results. I mean, when I took over refining, I was president for 6 years. The lost workday injury rate was about 0.45 per 200,000. When I left, it was 0.08. It just came from, say 45 to 8. That's the kind of drop that we saw. And we were given International Refiner of the Year award twice in the last 3 years. So I think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for your systems that address both objective and the subjective side. And the passion has to come out clearly, not simply as words coming from health, environment, and safety staff, but also coming from the leadership.
There's a question from Sanjay Sharma, HED Sohar, Oman. His question is, what is your opinion on the ability to get the best results by way of positive strokes? Is it group recognition, individual recognition?
Very good question, Sanjay. Thank you. The answer to that question, you might think that I'm not quite responding. The answer to that question really depends upon the individual. You will be surprised, as leaders, we assume that recognition that will work for Ravi will work for KV. There are people who do not like to be recognized in front of other people. They are so shy because they don't like it. And those people need to be reinforced in private. Those are the people you need to go to their office, close the door, shake their hands, positively reinforce them, and they will be thrilled. There are other people who will say in a forum like this, bring it on, Talia and everything else. So the recognition is dependent upon the individual. I believe in both individual recognition as well as team recognition. Both have merit. It all depends upon how you utilize that. If the team performs certain things and provides outstanding results, you need to recognize the team. But individuals also need to be recognized. But how you recognize individuals depends upon the individual themselves. Yes, sir.
To measure the effectiveness, subjective part of it, while the objective part, we can measure effectiveness.
Objective.
Effectiveness involves commitment and...
It's again a very good question. There isn't a simple mathematical way to go and measure the subjective side. And what we were doing was literally every 6 months we had the external consultant would go and conduct a focus group survey of the employees at all levels. And without any names, without anything, they will have a set of questions, and their questions will say, do you truly believe that management puts safety as a core value? Yes or no? Do you see management walking the talk, or they're simply going through the motions? Have you seen any changes in your workplace in the last 6 months? There were questions like that, and that is how we did the pulse survey every 6 months to see how we are progressing. And we learned a tremendous amount from that. So those are the only way you can get to know the subjective side, is to really go to people, and people need to be comfortable that their name will never be revealed and that they can speak their mind. And that's why you have to have an outside consultant who has no line responsibility to do that survey.